from high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we are so radically transgressive, our drag queens dressed like men. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radio. So glad you could join us this evening, and it's time for a very special edition of the Decline of Western Civilization News Roundup. Why is it very special, you ask? Well, because normally we require 5 stories to paint a full picture of that week's civilizational decline, but this week I require only 2. A pair of bookends, if you will. 2 stories that warrant more explication and analysis than can be done within the constraints of our ordinary format. And so, with that having been said, Dateline Washington, Wednesday, 25 July. President Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. delivered at long last his much-anticipated Oval Office address to the nation this week, in which he was expected to state, 1, that he's decided to stand down for re-election, and 2, that he is throwing his support behind Vice President the California Cackler. Except, in true inimitable Joe Biden fashion, he never actually said either of the things that were supposed to be the reason why he was giving the address. Lady Curmudgeon and I were sitting there watching the whole thing, and we both keep remarking, he hasn't said the thing. He still hasn't said the thing. He still hasn't said the thing, and he never said the thing. And let's pause for a moment of historical perspective here, because this address has 2 direct antecedents since the advent of television. Lyndon Johnson, 1968, quote, "I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president." Richard Nixon, 1974, quote, "I shall resign the presidency tomorrow at 12 noon. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that time in this office." You see, the way this normally works is when you're the president and you are announcing the end of your own political career, you look the people of the country in the eye and you say the damn words. Joe Biden, for reasons that will be speculated on by generations of future historians, he couldn't muster the courage or the basic decency to look the people of the country in the eye and say the damn words. All we got was some mumbled, barely intelligible gobbledygook about passing the torch, and then a noticeably half-hearted thank you to Kamala Harris, which didn't sound a whole hell of a lot like a full-throated endorsement. And that's probably not the first time you have heard the words Kamala Harris and full-throated in the same sentence, but that's not important now. And there's another weird thing we need to talk about with this address. Namely, why was Biden's eye line about 6 feet away from the camera lens, way the hell over there somewhere? Why did it look like one of Hunter's stripper friends was doing a pole dance off in the wings and Joe just couldn't take his eyes off it? Teleprompters have existed for about 75 years now, almost as long as Joe Biden himself. The prompter I am using right now costs less than $150, and it provides me, as you can see, a perfectly direct eye line to the camera lens. So, why does it seem like Joe Biden's looking at something on the other side of the room? If you want my best guess, it's because the old guy is so blind at this point, he requires a gigantic big screen with freaking 8-inch tall letters just so he can read the text. Badly. A screen of such prodigious size that it makes the speaker look like he is trying to get the attention of a cab driver down the street. So this was, for a variety of reasons, probably the single most bizarre Oval Office address in presidential history. As for the actual contents of the text, insofar as they could be understood, I think my favorite thing was how he first made the wildly, spectacularly false claim that we're not fighting any wars anywhere in the world, and then he closes the speech by saying, "And may God protect our troops." Which is a weird thing to say when you're not fighting any wars anywhere in the world. It's such a weird thing to say, in fact, that one can't help wondering, 1, seriously, who the hell writes this crap? And 2, are they intentionally trying to make their own president look like a fool? Because that's kind of mean. It's not like he needs any help with that. Even many, many decades ago, back when he was in the intellectual prime of his life, such as it was, Joe Biden has never been a man who requires any help making himself look foolish, and may God protect our troops who are not fighting anywhere. Amen. Dateline Sodom and Gomorrah. Dateline Paris, Friday, 26 July. Well, if you're a fan of bearded drag queens reenacting the Last Supper and dudes in leotards tongue wrestling with their junk sticking out, I am guessing you very much enjoyed the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics. The people who conceived this pageant of nihilism and debauchery say their goal was to promote something called diversity and inclusion. But for those of us who aren't lucky enough to be weird, creepy sex perverts, which is to say, the vast majority of people in the world, the sense of inclusion was, shall we say, conspicuously in absence. To this reporter, who is old enough to remember when these things used to be exercises in host countries commemorating and promoting their own history and culture and achievements, this thing felt far more like an elaborate national suicide note, and possibly also a suicide note from the Olympic movement itself. For it is ironic today to consider the fact that it was a Frenchman, Pierre de Coubertin, who first conceived the modern Olympic movement in the early 1890s, and he conceived it for the purpose of promoting the many achievements of Western civilization, going all the way back to the ancient Greeks, who conceived the ancient Olympic movement in the belief that if every 4 years we get people from all of the different Greek city-states to gather together in the spirit of friendly competition, it will promote international discourse and understanding, it will reduce the incidence of open warfare, and it might just result in a more peaceful and tolerant Greek peninsula and archipelago. Mr. Coubertin had the idea of taking that same concept and expanding it to the whole planet. Most people also forget that for the first few installments of the modern Olympic Games, the athletic competitions were only half of the program. There was also a very extensive artistic and cultural program as well. The modern Olympics were intended to be a showcase for the widest possible range of human endeavor, going far beyond just athletic competitions. The artistic and cultural side of the program was supposed to be a vehicle whereby all of mankind could gain a benefit from the most talented young people coming together and sharing ideas and comparing notes with each other. Fast forward to today, and what are we left with? A corporatized, made-for-TV infomercial for weird sex perverts and dumb woke politics. If you saw anything culturally edifying in those opening ceremonies, all I can say is I think you have a weird idea of culture. Now, the French may have stopped being good at war, the only sport that matters, around 220 years ago, but even still, France in the modern age has produced no shortage of great men and women and grand achievements that are more than worthy of being commemorated in the venue of a thing like an Olympic opening ceremony. But evidently, the wacky wokesters who are running the country today, they have no interest in celebrating any of it. If anything, this had the appearance of a national shame fest, of France repudiating itself, of the French declaring yet another act of surrender, throwing up yet another white flag. Not this time before a foreign occupier, but before the forces of nihilist materialism and sexual anarchy. But it wasn't France that I kept thinking about as I watched this cavalcade of smut and filth and degeneracy. It was Weimar Germany I couldn't stop thinking of. You remember Weimar Germany? Where the big cities became such dens of perversion and licentiousness, and it drove such widespread public disgust out in the countryside that it wound up leading to the rise of the National Socialists and a fun party that we know as the Second World War. And now we have the French in the year 2024 broadcasting out to the world that their society values above all else nihilism and debauchery and transgression toward all things traditional and normative. And it's a bold move, really. Advertising your capital city as a modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah after you have invited hundreds of thousands of unreconstructed Islamic radicals to come live there. Like, is anybody over there actually cognizant of the real-world consequences they could potentially bring down on themselves by putting on a display like this? Because the mockery and the derision may have been mostly directed at Christians, but I guarantee you the Muslims liked it just as little. I mean, do you guys not realize that they also venerate Jesus as a prophet? Because I don't feel like you do. Frankly, I'm surprised the Muslims haven't already burned down Paris over this shit. And we come back to the question that we often find ourselves asking. Who the hell is this for? When you're putting this program together, when you've got your organizing committee sitting all around the table and some guy says, I've got it. Let's have some fat, hairy drag queens reenact the Last Supper. And nobody at the table says, who is that for? Why is that a good idea? This thing withstands every layer of bureaucratic government review all the way up to the president of the republic, and nobody at any point says, yeah, maybe let's not have fat bearded drag queens reenact the Last Supper. To illustrate the point, as if it needs illustrating, but bear with me. Suppose you're an average American family, a husband, a wife, 2 or 3 kids of an impressionable age. You sit down together to watch the Olympics, as families have been doing for generations now, and which they've never had any reason to think twice about doing, because the Olympics are supposed to be the most family-friendly kind of programming that is ever on television, where the whole world comes together. They set politics aside and they revel in the honest, earnest pursuit of athletic glory and personal achievement, and maybe the kids learn something useful about history and geography in the process. Everybody wins, right? Except, what do you tell those kids about the bearded drag queen Last Supper? What do you tell them about a dude with his testicles sticking out of his leotard making out with another dude? What do you tell them when the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games devolves into literal gay pornography? Are you supposed to say, "Look there, kids, this is French culture, isn't it great?" And how hilarious is it that the forces of industrialized nihilistic sex perversion, they are always telling us, they're always swearing up and down, "Cross my heart, hope to die. We have absolutely no interest in trying to recruit children into weird, creepy sex stuff." And yet every time you turn around, there's yet another thing that kids can no longer watch without seeing either outright gay sex or lots of references to gay sex. There's yet another cultural institution that's been captured and co-opted by the genderqueer industrial complex. But let's take the best case scenario here. Let's suppose you and the wife and the kids actually managed to make it through the artistic portion, such as it was, of the opening ceremony. And now we're on to the Parade of Nations, where we all get to see the flags and the fun outfits and the quirky human interest stories. It's the best part of the first day, right? There should be no possible way to screw that up and turn it into an exercise in political divisiveness. And oh, here we go, kids, gather around. Here comes the United States team with the flag being carried by fucking LeBron James? You're actually serious right now? This isn't some sort of elaborate troll out of all the people on the team? You picked fucking LeBron James? The reason I ask is because the dude is on record more than once, more than twice, more than 20 times as saying he hates the United States. That dude who gets paid $50 million to work 3 nights a week, 7 months a year, who is a certified billionaire, who is about to buy himself an NBA expansion team with cash on hand. He is on the record as saying he is the victim of an endemically racist society, and you and I are his oppressor. That dude rails against the supposed injustices of the society that made him rich beyond the dreams of avarice, while pimping sneakers made by 8-year-old child slaves and never uttering a word of criticism about the monstrous regime that enables their enslavement. That's the fucking guy you picked to carry my flag into the Olympic Games. If I am our hypothetical young husband and father at this point, you know what I'm gonna do right now? I'm picking up the TV remote, I am rising to my feet, and I'm saying, fuck you NBC, fuck the Olympics, fuck LeBron James, and fuck France for that matter. And then I am turning on a John Wayne movie. And then I'm placing $5 in the swear jar, because that's what civilized people do when they curse in front of their children. Final conclusion? I am unwilling to still be living in California when the Olympics come to LA 4 years from now, because Paris has drastically upped the ante here, and now LA is going to have to find a way to put on something even more gayer and more perverted than this, and I have no doubt they will find a way to succeed. And I just don't want that happening 100 miles away from where I am. I need more distance than that. But here's my actual final conclusion. The Olympics were pretty cool for a really long time. But that time is now well and truly over. When a thing turns into just another malevolent quasi-government bureaucracy, which the IOC very much is now, and just another vehicle for dumb, woke, sexual politics, it is no longer a cultural institution of any value or usefulness, or any kind of cultural institution at all when you get right down to it. It's just another product that ain't worth buying. Was this writing already on the wall when they blew up the amateur rule and started letting pro athletes in? Yeah, it probably was. But you know what time it is now? It's your favorite part of the program. When I stop my bloviating and pass the controls to my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, winner of 3 straight gold medals in the sheer dominance event at the large furry hominid Olympics, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.